Hi, I'm Jason. Welcome to my workshop. This is my 8-inch Grizzly jointer. I bought it used about 4 years ago. It's probably a 10 or 12-year-old machine, and I like it a lot, except for one thing, and I'll tell you about that in just a minute. The things I like about it, it's 8-inch cut capacity versus my very first jointer, which was 6 inches. It makes a big difference. And with an 8-inch jointer, you get a much longer bed, especially this one. I've got a lot of in-feed support, so I can joint 8-foot boards no problem. Recently, I started building a shaker table made out of solid cherry, and the cherry's highly figured. And whether I was face jointing or edge jointing, I was getting a lot of tear out, even if I was taking really light passes. And I know the knives are sharp, and I know that I've got everything adjusted correctly. I've been doing this for quite a few years, and other woods joint just fine, but the cherry's been giving me a headache. So a friend of mine gifted me this Helical Cutterhead. Some people call it a segmented cutter head. He gave that to me about 2 years ago. He picked it up for a jointer of his, and he never installed it. And he knew that I had a Grizzly and asked if I wanted it. And I said, well, heck yeah, but do you know if it'll fit my jointer? And he didn't know. So I went to Grizzly's website and I looked at a picture of a cutter head that looks just like this one. And it looks like it will fit my jointer perfectly, but I'm not 100% sure. So there's going to be a little bit of drama leading up to actually installing and using this. I won't really know until I get this all torn apart and installed. So I'm going to get to that right now, and keep your fingers crossed for me. Okay, so a little bit about this Helical Cutterhead. I didn't know who made it, but I had a suspicion. There's a company called Bryd that makes very high quality cutter heads. And so I sent some pictures of this to the company, and they confirmed that this is one of theirs. This is called a Bryd Shelix cutter head for an 8-inch jointer, but they could not confirm whether it was for my jointer. So still a little bit of a guessing game. So these cutter heads do not come with bearings on them. So I got a hold of Grizzly and I ordered a couple of new replacement bearings for my jointer. So I'll be putting those on. And what's unique about these cutter heads is that they have a whole bunch of small cutters on them made out of carbide, and each one has 4 sides. So if one gets nicked or dull, or if they all get dull, you loosen this Torx screw and you just rotate the cutter to a fresh side. Okay, so I already removed the cutter head guard before I started the video. That was easy. It was just one bolt and it popped right out. So now I need to remove the fence, and I'm not going to show you every nut and bolt that I take apart on this because every jointer is different. I just want to give you a sense of how this goes. So I've already removed a couple of bolts under here, and now I can just slide this whole fence off, hopefully. Yep. Okay, and now I'll take off this rabbiting shelf, which I've never ever used for rabbiting, but whatever. Cool. All right, so now I need to remove this rear cover, and there's a belt guard right under here. But first, there's a lot of old sawdust on here, so I think I'll blow it out while I have a chance. By the way, a couple safety things. Make sure you've got this unplugged and put some safety glasses on because this stuff flies everywhere. That's 2, and that comes right off. All right, so now we'll get the belt cover off and just a couple of bolts here. So all kinds of surprises with this thing today. I had to take the back sheet metal panel off to get at a couple of nuts. And now I've got to take the front panel off because it's the only way I can loosen the mounts for the motor so that I can get the tension off the motor and get the belt off that pulley. It's never easy. So that was a major pain in the butt, but I was finally able to get the motor mounts loose and push the motor up and get the tension off the drive belts. Now the drive belt's gone. So there's some good news. And after that, I lowered the in-feed and out-feed tables to give me more clearance so that I have more room to pull this cutter head out. But before I do that, I want to preserve these knives because I think I can sell the cutter head on eBay and it's going to be useless without some good knives in it. So I'm going to loosen the gib bolts, take the knives out, flip them upside down, and then put them back in and tighten down the gib bolts again. That'll keep them all in one place, and then I'll wrap them in some protective cardboard or something, and then hopefully I can get a few bucks for it. Okay, so I've turned the joiner around so you can see this next part. I need to remove this pulley from the cutter head. This is what the belt sat on. And there's not a lot of great places to grab with your hand, and you'll probably hurt yourself. So I jammed a couple of plastic shims on the infeed side. Remember, I turned this around, so that's the infeed side now. And then I take this Allen wrench and turn counterclockwise like that. And that came out fairly easily. What I don't think is going to come off easily is the pulley. No way. So never beat this with a hammer or a stick or try to pry it with anything. What you want to do is go to an auto parts store and get a wheel puller. It might be called a pulley puller, I have no idea, but I've had this thing for probably 20 years. I mean, gosh, I've worked on a lot of machines. So what you do is these little hooks go on the back of the pulley in 3 spots. Make sure it's on the back side and not in the spot where the belt rides in. And then you want to tighten the center spur, I guess is what you'd call it, something like that. And then as you tighten this, I don't even have to use a wrench. It's just pulling that pulley right off of the shaft. And there's a key that comes with it, so make sure that doesn't fall. All right, that wasn't as bad as I thought. Wow. So now I'll loosen this and just take this out and set it aside. And now I take the pulley off, and there's that key, and that's staying in there pretty good. All right, so now I can pull the cutter head off. Okay, so now using that same Allen key that I used to remove the pulley, I can just start removing the bearing blocks. There's one here and one back here, and there's 4 bolts. And Grizzly says that there might be some shims under the bearing blocks that you may or may not need with a replacement cutter head, but we're going to make sure that I save them just in case. And I should be able to just pick this up. Yep, there's a shim under there, so I want to make sure that I don't lose that. Okay, so I know this looks a little MacGyvered, but this is actually something I learned from Grizzly's YouTube channel. In order to get the rear bearing block separated from the bearing inside, I needed to support that with a couple of blocks and some duct tape. So what I need to do now is gently tap the top with a block of wood and a dead blow hammer, and try to drive this shaft down through the bearing, and this whole cutter head should just drop straight down. There it goes. Okay, now I just need to get that front bearing block off. I don't think it's going to be as hard to get off as the other one. And I'll use a smaller dead blow and the same block of wood. So Grizzly actually recommends this too. There it goes. I'm going to flip this around. Go at it from the other side. There we go. There it is. Okay, so we're making progress. So the bearings are out of the bearing blocks, and I checked the new bearings that came from Grizzly, and they definitely fit. You won't be able to do it with just hand pressure, though. You have to get it in as far as you can, and then you've got to be really, really careful here because you don't want to damage these bearings. So I take a block of wood in my dead blow, and I just gentle taps. Make sure that the block of wood is sitting perfectly flat on that bearing or you could damage it. So a couple taps at a time. Make sure, again, no wobble. You want it flat on there. Okay. Okay, and that's down in there. And then we'll do the same thing for the front bearing block. And I've already blown all the sawdust out with some compressed air. It's a good idea to wipe down the bearings before you put them in. Get the sawdust off, if there is any. And that just went in with finger pressure, so that's all kinds of awesome. So this one, good, that slipped down in there. Something I didn't show you when I pulled this out is there's a little spring clip. And it requires a special tool, which again I have, but you can get these at any automotive parts store, even some hardware stores will sell them. So it's got these two little pins that go in these little holes in the clip, and you squeeze, and be careful because this thing, if it pops, it could go flying and you'll never find it. So there's a little groove that this sits in, so you just want to squeeze and push down in until it seats itself right in there, and it did. Perfect. Right in there. Now, Grizzly recommended wrapping the Shelix cutter head in cardboard and tape to protect the cutters, which I think is a fantastic idea. And then we put the shaft down in the bearing, and this is where I start to get a sense of if this is actually going to fit or not. So, all right, and then I take the top one and I go like this. And then I'll take that heavier block of wood again and just gentle taps. All right, that's in there all the way. Woohoo! Okay, so I've got the new cutter head and the bearings and the bearing blocks all installed. They all fit together very nicely. The big question is, will it fit the jointer? I swear to God, I'm not kidding or lying when I say I have no idea if this is the right cutter head for this jointer, but we're about to find out. So I'm gonna take it out of the cardboard. Careful not to nick the cutters. I just want to cut through the tape. Okay. Oh, I'm a little nervous about this. So I'm going to try it without the shims, these 3 shims on the back side of the jointer, because I don't know if I'm going to need them yet. So here's the back bearing block, the front bearing block, and let's see how this works. Oh. It fits. Okay, so now I'm going to reinstall the 4 bolts that hold the bearing blocks down. We'll start them just finger tight so I don't cross any threads. Okay, and we'll just make sure that still spins. It does. The bearings sound really good. And now I need to get the pulley back on the shaft. All right, so I think we finally got it all dialed in. I've spent quite a bit of time adjusting this thing. I did have to replace all but 3 shims under the bearing block right here. And I found that adjusting this is very similar to when you have knives, but instead of adjusting the knives up and down, you're adjusting the outfeed table of the jointer. So I've got my straight edge set on one side all the way up against the edge, and I'm checking for parallel. I want the cutter head to be perfectly parallel with the table. So I'll just rock this back and forth, and I want the cutter heads to kiss the straight edge but not move it. So you hear that? It's just barely grazing it, but not moving it. So then I put it all the way on this side, and I do the same thing. Just barely kissing it, but not moving it. So I think we're in good shape. I'm gonna put all of this back together and we're gonna make some test cuts. Okay, so I'm pretty excited, but I'm also a little bit nervous. This is the jointer's maiden voyage with the new Helical Cutterhead. And for its first test, I'm gonna try some highly figured cherry. here we go. Wow, I'm speechless right now, but I'll try to speak. The cut quality is just amazing. This piece of cherry is just glass smooth, no snipe. Whether I joint on the face or the edge, I just get a beautiful, beautiful cut. And wow, just wow. A couple of other observations. It is noticeably quieter. But with the dust collector running, I still need to make sure that I'm wearing hearing protection because it's still pretty loud in here. The dust collection seems to be improved. I don't have as many chips on the bed of the jointer as I used to have. And it's just fun to use now. I never thought of the jointer as a fun tool to use. But I've taken an old used jointer and turned it into something that you'd pay probably close to $2,000 new for with a helical cutterhead already installed. So special thanks to my friend Andrew for hooking me up with the helical cutterhead. If you'd like more information about the Bryd Shelix cutterhead, I'll put a link in the description below. And if you enjoyed watching this video and want to see more, please hit the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel, please. That's the way you'll know when I've got new videos posted, and I'm posting more and more all the time. I'm starting to have a lot of fun with this channel, and I hope to have a lot more great content coming up very soon. So until then, we'll see you soon.